Hello everyone, it's a great delight this morning to do a presentation on Gudina Tumsa, the prophet, martyr, and distinguished church leader shaping justice and theology in the African context. This is Professor Samuel Daressa, Associate Professor of Theology at Concordia University, St. Paul. Over the course of more than 30 years, Gudina Tumsa has been portrayed in various roles within the scholarly community's imagination. These roles include prophet, saint, and martyr, and a distinguished church leader and a theologian. Many scholars have even linked Gudina Tumsa to Dietrich Bonhoeffer of Germany and called him the Bonhoeffer of Africa, drawing parallels to Bonhoeffer's resolute stance against oppressive ideologies. Gudina's commitment to integrity and justice and aligning his actions with his words has left an imaginable mark on the Ethiopian context and the African church's understanding of mission and the church's role in society. Similar to Bonhoeffer, Gudina suffered martyrdom not only because of his Christian faith, but also due to his position as a Christian leader and a theologian, openly challenging the state's ideology and absolutism. And Gerhard Ecke, one of the German scholars, when comparing Gudina Tumsa to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, commented on their shared commitment to maintaining integrity and aligning between their words and actions, as well as their representation of Christianity and their individual values. This unique integrity played a crucial role in their faithful testimonies until the end of their lives. Just like the prophets in the Old Testament, who endured lives as they fought for justice and righteousness in the public sphere of society, Gudina also sacrificed his own life while serving others and empathizing with the hardship of his people. His actions stemmed from a profound dedication to protect the rights of all Ethiopian citizens. Through his writings, he urged the church to advocate for the poor, the marginalized, and oppressed individuals. Additionally, he played a crucial role in guiding his church to define its identity amidst numerous obstacles and conflicts. The sermons he delivered discussed various political, social, and economic matters. And this presentation now explores Gudina Tumsa's enduring impact on justice within the Ethiopian context and his comprehensive theology, which continues to shape African church's understanding of mission and the church's responsibility in society. From 1966 to 1979, Gudina Tumsa served as the General Secretary of the Ethiopian Evangelical Church, Mekane Jesus, and presently, with more than 12 million members, the EECMY is recognized as the fastest growing and largest Lutheran church globally. Now, an overview of the life of Gudina. Evangelical Christianity first emerged within the Oromo community in Ethiopia, before spreading to other regions of the country. The Oromo people, who make up the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia, are also found in significant number in Kenya and Somalia. According to missionary accounts, European Mission Society faced numerous obstacles and exerted persistent efforts to introduce Christianity to the Oromo people and largely to Ethiopian people for many years. However, it was only in the 20th century that the vision of reaching the Oromo and beyond the Oromo, other Ethiopian community, became a reality. Through the arrival of the first indigenous missionaries trained by the Swedish Evangelical Mission. These missionaries ventured into the Oromo land and to the larger Ethiopia and successfully delivered the gospel to people, marking a significant milestone in the history of evangelical Christianity in Ethiopia. Gudina Tumsa was born in 1929, 20 years after evangelical Christianity was introduced to the Ethiopian community. Despite his parents following the Oromo traditional religion, Gudina Tumsa attended a school established by local missionaries aiming to spread the gospel within the community. At this school, students were encouraged to study the Bible together with each other every morning before class began. It was through his study and the companionship of fellow Christians that Gudina and several other students embraced Christianity, as they found the biblical text to be truly significant. After converting to the Christian faith, his first action was to share Christ with his family and eliminating the ritualistic homi tree, a tree revered as a sacred by worshippers, including his parents. Following the completion of 4th grade, he was transferred to Nedjo boarding school, known as the Swedish Mission School. In 1945, Gudina moved to Nakamte, where he finished 8th grade. As his financial circumstances prevented him from pursuing high school education, he took up employment as a gardener at Teferi Mekonnen Hospital, named in honor of the Emperor of Ethiopia. Later, he was promoted to the role of translator, assisting foreign staff who were unable to communicate with locals in their own language. Gudina was married to Tsahai Tolesa in 1951, when he was working as a translator at Nakamte Hospital. Later on, Gudina became an assistant nurse. When the Christians in Nakamte recognized Gudina's spiritual and leadership skills, they suggested that he go to Nedjo for theological education in order to become their pastor. Subsequently, he was sent to the Bible school in Nedjo from 1955 to 1958. The Bible school in Nedjo was sponsored by the Swedish Evangelical Mission and the German Hermannsburg Mission. After successfully completing the 2-year pastoral training course, Gudina was ordained by the Central Synod of Ethiopian Evangelical Church Mekane Yesus and became the first indigenous pastor of evangelical congregation in Nakamte. During this time and afterwards, his wife Tsahai Tolesa started a family and supported Gudina despite his frequent absence due to his ministry and other obligations. After being ordained, Gudina became a parish pastor in Nakamte for a few years. He was later appointed by the leaders of the EECMY as a synod organizer in Kabata and Hadia area, located in the southern province of Ethiopia. There, his primary responsibility was to bring together evangelical Christians in the region and establish them as official congregations of Mekane Yesus Church. And ultimately, his goal was to organize them into the Synod of the ECMY. The leaders discovered his exceptional leadership skill here and his aspiration for more education. As a result, they decided to send him to Luther Seminary, located in St. Paul, Minnesota, through a scholarship provided by the Lutheran World Federation. During his time in St. Paul studying, he successfully earned a Bachelor of Divinity degree after 3 years of dedicated study, which is from 1963 to 1966. Once he finished his studies at Luther, he assumed the role of General Secretary of the ECMY from 1966 to 1979. This position bestowed on him the responsibility of overseeing operations of the church at both national and international levels, making him the central administrator of the church's work. He took on the leadership role in organizing the Council for Cooperation of Churches in Ethiopia, ECCE, and became the first chairperson in 1976. When acknowledging the role Gudina played in bringing together evangelical churches, my friend Tumaba Eshete states that Gudina Tumsa, the General Secretary of the ECMY, played a significant role in conveying the message of unity and the necessity of establishing an interdenominational platform at this crucial moment in the history of the church and the national church as a whole. And additionally, he actively participated at the international level, collaborating with the Lutheran World Federation, All African Council of Churches, and the World Council of Churches. And it was due to his writings on ecumenical harmony among various Ethiopian church traditions, as well as his global and influential leadership role, that Gudina became intolerable to the Marxist government. Gudina was kidnapped on July 28, 1979, and was killed by the communist Derg regime on the same day. And Tahitolesa, his wife, was arrested on February 2, 1980, and endured imprisonment and torture for more than 10 years. During her time in prison, Sahai faced unimaginable difficulties, but fortunately she managed to survive and continue to serve God, sharing her experience with a lot of people. In 1992, after being released from prison, she was reunited with her children until her days in October 2014 at the age of 84. She served at Biftu Bole congregation in Addis Ababa, a congregation initiated by her and her children. Now I will move on to Gudina Tumsa's contribution in Ethiopia. The political context and Gudina Tumsa's contribution. Gudina served, as I said, as the General Secretary of the ECMY during the time of the Emperor Haile Selassie, who adopted the feudal system. In his particular system of governance, rulers possessed the power to seize land, while peasants were forced into the role of tenants. Essentially, landowners were authorized to collect taxes from peasants on behalf of the king. Consequently, marginalized communities residing at the periphery were relegated to the status of peasants, thus remaining subordinate to the landowners. During this crucial time, Gudina emphasized the church's responsibility to serve as a role model for the society through its actions. He believed that the church should set an example by overcoming social divisions such as class struggles and animosity between various religions and ethnic communities. Gudina proposed that dialogue, trust, and love should extend beyond just the immediate community to Christians of different confessions and persons of other faiths and ideologies. Under Gudina Tumsa's leadership, the church experienced a transformation in its ministry and became more proactive in advocating for the marginalized. It recognized the importance of being a voice for those who were voiceless. Gudina also began organizing various seminars to educate and prepare Christians and Christian leaders on many issues. Two notable examples worth mentioning are the workshop on the stewardship held for leaders of the Evangelical Church Mekane Jesus in 1968, and the consultation on the nature of theological education in Ethiopia, 1979. The seminar on stewardship was significant as its primary emphasis was on how to responsibly manage and care for God's creation in a context where a large number of people were experiencing poverty. During the Church General Assemblies, he also started bringing up significant issues for discussion, followed by resolutions that required action. For instance, in 1971, under Gudina Tumsa's leadership, the Church addressed the severe political situation in Ethiopian context, and this General Assembly was held in Yirgalem. As a significant number of the ECMI members were greatly impacted by the feudal system, the Church made a decision to pass a resolution that questioned, criticized, and proposed a motion to the Ethiopian government to liberate peasants from the exploitation caused by the feudal system. The Church strongly condemned these practices, and the communication from this meeting was submitted to the country's parliament through the ECMI's president, Emmanuel Abraham. Gudina believed that the Church has a significant role to play in advocating for justice for those who are unprivileged. He argued that the Church represents the liberation of individuals from oppression, but with certain guidelines: human rights, justice, and the rule of the law, and the grassroots democratic participation. Gudina also supported the active involvement of both Christians and non-Christians in politics, and particularly Christians. Following the example set by the Christian gospel, he stated that the Church should see its continuing task to be the full liberation of the whole person, and should embrace the opportunities presented by the new circumstances in order to create a more equitable society. The Church's response to the famine in Ethiopia, which was presented to the General Assembly by the North Ethiopian Synod on April 23, 1973, also indicates the fact that Gudina Tumsa was committed to the Ethiopian community. According to certain reports, the Church stood against the government when it decided to hide the fact that drought was causing immense suffering for the poor, leading to the loss of millions of lives. The government prioritized its own future over the situation of those affected by the drought. Under the leadership of Gudina, the ECMY had to intervene by speaking up for the voiceless. And the Marxist government was introduced to Ethiopia in 1974. And the Marxist government viewed religion as contributing factor to Ethiopia's backwardness, so to say. As a result, they took steps not only to sever the long-standing connection between the Church and state, especially with regard to their relationship with the Orthodox Church, but also to cultivate an atmosphere that was unfavorable towards religion. In contrast, Gudina saw the Church as prime example and advocated for justice on behalf of the marginalized. He believed that the Church represented the liberation of individuals from oppression, and he argued, quote unquote, the Christian gospel refuses to be identified or to be considered as part of feudalism or capitalism, and as such it cannot fade away with these systems, since by its nature the gospel of Christ is totally different from them. Christ himself is the gospel. There is no gospel apart from his presence with us in our daily labor. Gudina also believed that it was important to educate and create awareness among Christian leaders in Ethiopia about the communist ideology and how dangerous it can be if embraced without criticism. In 1975, a year after the communist government came into power, he told a group of pastors, I see it as my duty to prepare the church for persecution that will surely come. And that was Gudina, thinking about preparing the church for what was coming. And in February and April of 1975 and 1976 in October, these seminars were held. In that way, Gudina began to educate the leaders to prepare for what was coming. And when the communist government started closing churches and imprisoning and torturing Christians, the ECMI also sent a letter to the government bodies in 1974 requesting complete religious freedom and equality among all groups of people in Ethiopia. All groups of people in Ethiopia. The letter appears to be a protest against the government's suppression of other religious groups by favoring the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And at the same time, the resolution passed by the ECMI Executive Committee on September 20, 1974, states that the position of the Church should be based on biblical theology when it comes to concern for human rights, equality, dignity, and stand for truth. And as Øyvind Eide, one of the Norwegian scholars, stated, Gudina Tumsa was seen as establishing the church's position in competition with the socialist government and the Socialist Party. His commitment to human rights and democratic structure in the church and society, economic justice to the poor, cultural and political self-determination of various ethnic groups brought him into confrontation with the government of his time. Therefore, Gudina was arrested twice in June 1979 before his colleagues realized that the government's intention to execute him. This prompted African leaders in the region to intervene out of deep concern for his life. Determined to save his life, Bishop Josiah Kibira of Tanzania and Christian Krause of Germany tried to rescue Gudina. But he refused to leave the country, saying, "This is my church and my congregation. How can I, as a church leader, leave my flock at this difficult time? I have repeatedly asked my pastors to stay with me." He then quoted 2 Corinthians 5:15 and said, "Christ died for me, and Christ died for all, so that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." Gudina was then murdered on July 28, 1979. He was killed for refusing to endorse the state's politics, in particular the state's policies against religious freedom. For the world Christian leaders at large, Gudina remains martyr and teacher. Like the evangelist Stephen, the first martyr in the book of Acts, who was faithful to his Lord and Savior and dedicated to the extension of his kingdom. History teaches us that Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Oscar Romero were also murdered while resisting state oppression and protecting the oppressed and the poor in their respective countries. The same thing happened to Gudina, who called for the public role of the Christian faith in the political life of the Ethiopian society. The most important lesson why Gudina Tumsa's life, work, and thought are meaningful to Christianity in Africa and the whole world, or the whole Christian community, are his faithful witness and discipleship. In the face of political adversaries and dictatorship, he knew that Discipleship of Jesus Christ would eventually mean facing suffering and even death. His witness to the gospel in the political context of his time meant to be ready to pay the highest cost of discipleship. His martyrdom adds the depths of personal witness to his prophetic message of faith that touches people's heart and mind. His legacy is the reminder to the church about its mission. The duty of the church involves promoting justice, freedom, and peace. And Christians remain faithful to their faith as long as they remain the public voice of any society. Thank you for listening.